Good morning. uh, good to see everyone. We will start the regulations panel. And we planned on doing a little game, which is instead of everyone introducing themselves, they would introduce the person next to them and say something about them.
Next in which direction?
Start with Vlad. Vlad, you start.
Okay, so I don't know this guy. I have no idea who he is, but I will make assumptions based on his looks. So he's wearing a beard, which means that he's trying to hide his face, and so does with his hair and the glasses, because right now when I look at him, I can only see like 70% of his face, and I, as a regulator, want to see 100% because I'm very, very strict, and I want to have a clear audit of whatever he does. So please get a shave, both on your head and on your face. You don't have to look at me. I don't have to follow the same rules because, you know, I'm the regulator. So I don't know anything about you, but these are the rules.
Okay. I know you very well, by the way. So on my left side is Giacomo Zucco from Italy. I invited him personally to HCPP Congress, I think last year? Or
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah. So what I know about you, you are like, unlike me, you are like a Bitcoin maximalist, no? Or a bit.
I was until Riga. Now I'm a shitcoin mover.
Okay, so now I'm also Bitcoin maximalist, especially for this conference. What else? I don't know. I decided to take especially this T-shirt for this panel discussion because this Bitcoin, and this is the Czech Prime Minister who is trying to regulate Bitcoins. So you can see it here. And he's not very successful.
So Olga is a medical doctor, and she was researching in a medical matter. I'm very lucky that she is on my left and not you, because she started to work into computer science stuff more recently, going away from medical research to computer science and cryptography and so forth. And now she's cooperating with us, Maxime, Sabine, and others with some layer 3. Ideas like Spectrum, RGB, and this kind of stuff. And her company is called Pandora's Box, and Pandora Chain Box. Okay, I was almost perfect, right?
You could do the moves. Hi. So this is actually the most wonderful person that I've ever known.
Very lucky situation, huh?
See? Yeah. You can switch the places, but I can say the same about you. Yeah, this is the person who actually helps the planet, like every day, sorts all the trash, both from the head and from all of the cans. Probably it's the children also, because they are one of the main producers of CE2. And also, of course, makes a lot of investment in privacy issues, in Bitcoin, and a lot of other super cool stuff.
Thank you, Olga. That was almost correct. So we'll have that. Vlad. Oh, I thought I'm introducing you.
No, I'm just observing. I'm just questioning you guys.
So we're the monkeys and you are the observer.
What do I say? Vlad is the type of person that's got the notebook ready, so he'll be asking a lot of questions probably to us. I hope we'll be fine. Thank you. Yeah, I thought I'll be introducing you. Sorry, I didn't think of anything witty.
It's okay. Thank you, guys. So this is what regulation is all about. You're given a framework where people think they know things about topics and other people, and they just kind of filter that and give it to you. And we, as an audience and as citizens, we have to accept that. I'm just gonna introduce myself. My name is Roxana, and I have the Crypto Law podcast. And I built a community for 180 crypto lawyers, and that's why Mindy thought that it would be great for this panel. So I prepared a couple of questions, ideally 10, but there are 7 very important questions that I want to ask the panel today. And the first one would be, let's talk a bit about what triggered this whole regulations thing in the crypto space. What do you think was the moment that kind of triggered it? What was the cause of it? Because obviously we didn't have it a couple of years ago. So let's start with Sarah.
Yeah, that's fine. So in my opinion, I think what triggered regulation and the potential or no exact need for it is the ICO boom in 2017. I mean, in 2017 alone, $6 billion was raised by ICOs with 12 million an average per project. Those are a huge amount of money, and people will be investing into projects without doing their own due diligence. And regardless if we need regulation or not, I think the government's trying to protect the public, but you can't really regulate it, crypto, in a sort of a regulatory way. So if I was to say what started out with potentially ICOs, but no, ICOs potentially.
Well, I think that regulators' motivation goes a bit deeper than just ICOs. Like, they were invented as, they are basically parasites that are just there sucking every money flow there is. And therefore, as soon as they found out that there's something which is hidden, which doesn't pay taxes, they decided that they need to go for it because it's something that, there is something that they think is theirs. Therefore, they're just trying to make all this taxes thing all over them. That's it.
Thanks. I think there are 2 reasons we are seeing more of that in the recent years. The first one is that governments are slow to react to things in general. So if you think about that, in 1990, in the second half of 90s, e-gold was a stuff used for most of e-commerce, and it was working pretty fine. They had some auditing mechanism, advanced technological standards, and e-gold was working, and the government shut e-gold down and put the creator in jail just after 10 years of mainstream activity, at least in the online niche. So the government already takes some time to understand, because government basically selects people from using a mechanism of zero competition, political monopolism, corruption. So basically you have the less smart people in government usually, so they're also very slow. But eventually they understand what's going on and they try to stop everything. And the thing is that part of the timing is that the government is starting to get what Bitcoin is just now. And part of that is also because part of the adoption of Bitcoin is involving people that really don't understand the history of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was born after the failure of e-gold in order to create something similar to e-gold, but this time censorship resistant and government resistant. And Bitcoin made, as far as we know, a very good job at that. But now there are a lot of people getting involved in this kind of space without really knowing the history and the logical connection with the history of this kind of experiments. So if you think about the normal lawyer, he will just ignore Bitcoin for a while, and then when he will start to understand that Bitcoin is relevant, he will have to apply his own standards of how do we regulate, how will a regulator attack this, instead of understanding that this is a technology born in order not to be regulated and in order to regulate the regulators.
So the official reasons for governments to promote the regulation is we are protecting citizens. It's for your protections. But finally, they just want to control over all our transactions. We used to say that, especially in Europe, you know, we are in the state where even if you want to buy the porn, you cannot do that anonymously. You need to provide your personal information, credit card number, your personal name, and everything. So the thing is that as a society, we are moving to, how to say, thanks to technologies, crypto technologies and decentralization, to like decentralized peer-to-peer society where government is basically losing control over like a financial interaction, not only financial, but any like interaction between the people in the virtual world. So what they're just trying to do, they just try to keep the control because they're losing this control for sure. And I'm, for example, I'm like the privacy guy, so I use Monero, and I will have presentation how to switch from traditional banking system to crypto, and we use like also how to avoid KYC and AML. So the thing is that they are just trying to enforce this regulation to average common citizens, to have a control over all the transactions, to enforce taxation, and to just have what's going on.
All right, so those of you who know me might know me as the guy who writes for Bitcoin Magazine sometimes. And that makes a lot of sense to have some kind of insight on regulation. But before I was even that, my father works for the Romanian Tax Authority. So if you're Romanian in this hall, I hope you submitted your tax files the right way for your own sake.
I was joking before anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And by jus sanguinis, which means by inheritance, I should know a little something about regulation. And what I can tell you is that governments, and specifically in the example that I have in mind, the Romanian government, doesn't regulate Bitcoin because it understands how it works. It regulates Bitcoin because it doesn't, and it's just greedy to get some money because it understands there's a financial dimension to it. And whenever people exchange Bitcoin to fiat, they want to have their slice of the pie out of it. So from their perspective, it's just control, as Pavel said previously, and it's also just pure greed, just like in the case of people who use Bitcoin anyway, because we also have our own amount of greed, which tries to get away as much as we or they can from rules and establish our own citadels, because I know that's a big meme right now with 615 Bitcoins to become a member of the Bitcoin Citadel. I see that not many people know about the 615 meme. It's okay, you will at some point. It promises eternal riches and something which rhymes with it. But back to regulation, it's all about governments wanting to have more control over finances. It's about this framework which is turning to be much more Orwellian from a perspective, because with cash, everything was private in the sense that you'd have the confidentiality with the person with whom you're trading. But now with online retail, they have data stored about you and they know everything about your records. And with cryptocurrencies, it's not much better. Unless you do it peer-to-peer and it's confidential 100%, there's going to be some trace of it. It's going to be on the blockchain forever and it's auditable with Bitcoin. So yeah, it's difficult, and if we strive for privacy, then we must look for better means, because the government is actually getting better, but at this point, I think their problem, and I don't want to take too much time, but their problem is that they don't want to lose the fight by acknowledging that Bitcoin is money, and that's their biggest problem. They try to label it as a security, as a commodity, as some kind of object of value, but they're not going to say this is money, because it means that they can also accept Bitcoin to pay taxes and not use a processor like lots of governments which claim they accept Bitcoin do. And it also means that they will lose the battle and present this alternative to their fiat and say this actually works and we accept it. I don't see that happening in the next 10 years, but we can only hope.
Thank you. Okay, next question is, we're gonna discuss the topic of overregulation, because like they panicked so much in the past 2 years, basically, with launching a lot of laws against, you know, crypto projects and how to declare your taxes, income and all of that. So there are a lot of companies now that fear of entering the space because they fear the idea of overregulation. And how do we address that? And how do we make the entry point more flawless for companies? Because I think we need, we can always use new solutions to have, you know, have people build around Bitcoin or build around cryptography protocols. How do we encourage them to enter the space? And if you guys have positive examples that kind of overruled the overregulations, it would be great to hear.
Okay, if I can describe my or our solution in Slovakia, It'll be really funny, but okay, let's try. So the thing is that in Slovakia, there were, like last year, there was approved really bad crypto regulation, which means that in Slovakia, if Bitcoin is going up and you earn some money, you have to pay taxes from your profit. But if Bitcoin is going down and you are in loss, and you cannot use it as an expense. So economically, for all entrepreneurs in Slovakia, it doesn't make sense to use Bitcoin at all, or any cryptocurrencies, because it doesn't make sense from the economical point of view. So what we did in Slovakia, all crypto entrepreneurs, we just changed our permanent residency and tax residency to Panama. So now we are Panamanians. So for example, in Bratislava, we have like parallel police, and more than half of members and founding members of parallel police are Panamanians. I'm sorry for that, but this is the only solution. And so, yeah. So just the thing is that you have many different legislation. You can register a business in any country you can. So why to choose countries where there are really like bad, stupid regulation? Just choose like a better country. So my recommendation is just to be global and flexible, and use any suitable country for your business. Don't stay in European Union. Just go somewhere else. So this is my regulation. This is my recommendation against these stupid regulations. And the thing is, we should be aware that the countries, the government of countries, they should be competitive. You know, so everybody should do that, just to create pressure to the politician to make better regulation, or to completely cancel this regulation, because we are on the global market and we can choose the government and the state where we can do business.
I spoke too much already.
So I think I will be a little bit extreme, just as a simplification, oversimplification, but I think that if your problem is how to run your business on top of Bitcoin, on close to Bitcoin, and try to understand how to comply with regulation, probably your business idea was wrong. Meaning that Bitcoin allows you and or your customers to do things that they couldn't do before because of over-regulation. So regulation is an opportunity for a Bitcoin entrepreneur, because finally the kind of a web service that you could not offer with PayPal because it was not regulated enough, because your customer didn't have maybe a bank-like identity because they are in Africa or they are underage or they are whatever. Now finally they can pay you and they can get paid. So Bitcoin is a new business opportunity to go around regulations. And if your main point is how to stay compliant with regulation, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do business, but probably you will be more comfortable with a more traditional kind of business using PayPal and bank transfers and such stuff. The only reason you may want something super traditional and super compliant, but at the same time using crypto, is because you want to ride the crypto hype, which is a legit marketing concern, but it's very short term. In a time frame of 5 years, nobody will care if your regulated IPO is made with a token or a share. Ultimately, the point is, what is your business, which kind of client you're serving. If you use Bitcoin, you can serve a different kind of market that is underserved due to over-regulation. So regulation is, I mean, we hate it, but it's also a Bitcoin entrepreneur's best friend, because we go around it.
Now I remembered your talk during Honey Badger, as I remembered your line, "Thank you for your service," and I think we really should thank governments for their service, because A, they create a lot of fog, like all these buzzwords, fogs, all these regulations, laws and everything, but they still cannot threaten Bitcoin, and they still cannot forbid crypto. So they're dead. Thanks. And also by doing all of that, they also add a lot of money, like fiat money, into the Bitcoin. So again, thanks. But still, I'm not sure that we actually need to make this entry point flawless, because A, if people don't ask the questions like themselves, why should I starve, or why cannot I pay my developers, for example, because some bank in Malta decided to shut down or have a holiday today? First situation. Second one, if people need to consciously understand at some point that they are outlaws, because by default, whatever they do, they will constantly keep receiving accusations that they violated this or that law. Therefore, they need to consciously come to the conclusion that they cannot be regulated or they don't want to be. And they need to fight for all that they want to build. They need to stand out, because you never value something that is given for free or you take for granted. You need to consciously do some things aside from the common narratives that they have been present all around.
So I'm just going to conclude what Ron said pretty much, and I think that projects should actually focus on making the mass adoption happen rather than focusing on regulation. As soon as you start, your focus should be on how to make it work, how can I speed up what we're currently doing and make it easy for everyone to actually be a part of it, rather than worrying about what government's going to say about it. I mean, it is important because you don't want to get in trouble with the law, but at the same time, if we're going to think about regulation with crypto, then potentially maybe you shouldn't be going into this field, because that's not what primary focus of cryptocurrency and blockchain is.
Good point. Vlad raised a very interesting point around question 1 about the fact that basically taxing Bitcoin, taxing crypto is the government's way of kind of having control over it. And so this leads me to the next question, which is, in the context of, I think we paid for mass adoption, or we're paying for mass adoption with the fact that you have to pay taxes now for crypto. What is a good tax model for Bitcoin, and if there is a country in the world that actually does it right for its people?
Tax guy?
Tax guy.
Before I just give my tax suggestion, go on boats, travel the ocean, sail a lot, and then accident will happen.
Okay, so regarding taxation, the governments will have difficult times in the future. Taxation will be definitely more complicated, especially when you switch to like a truly anonymous cryptocurrencies like Monero, for example, with fungibility property. It will be almost impossible to find out that some organization or someone is just doing business. So this is the thing. So I think there are like multiple approaches in the future what the government can do. So the first thing is that there will be something like some kind of head tax, for example, or company fixed tax. So company will just pay just like some fixed annual tax just for doing crypto business, or head tax, which was, by the way, proposed by Mrs. Margaret Thatcher in the beginning of the 80s in the UK, which basically means that you will pay just head tax just because you are like a human. So it's the fixed tax. And I think, especially in the virtual world, it will be really difficult just to find out how much people should pay taxes, especially when all transactions can be anonymous. And another thing, what may happen in the future, and I predict this, is that the government probably will lose their control over financial transactions in the virtual world because of anonymization and because of decentralization. But still, they will have a full control over the physical world. So I strongly believe that this means that especially property tax will be increased in the future. So for example, now in San Francisco you have 1.5% property tax, which is really a lot. So you have a property for $1 million, for example, and every year you have to pay $15,000. In Slovakia, for example, Czech Republic, we pay almost zero property taxes, nothing. You know? So I think that because the government, they will lose like their income from taxation of the virtual services, I think they definitely increase taxation in the physical world, especially property tax and physical businesses, you know, because they still have and will have control over the physical world. So what I predict is that taxation will be will just switch to more to physical world, where still the government has and will have control. So this is just my prediction.
In my experience in this world, and it's not very long, I'm 27, but I have a degree in political science, and I know that governments are reactive and not active. So there needs to be a precedent in something in order for a certain law or constitution to be passed. And if we look at the world right now, we are basically in the framework of the post-World War II settlements. Every country in the world has a role which has been settled in 1945, roughly, with the exception of the newly formed states, but that's a different discussion. But in order for the governments to react to what we do, we need to actually do something as opposed to replicating the old model, which they know and understand very well. And my theory is that for Bitcoin to become something which is treated differently from fiat money, we actually have to treat Bitcoin as something other than fiat money. We have to hedge our reserves, for example, and save in Bitcoin, because that's a very good use case, the store of value. And we have to not think in terms of how do I use it to shop from, I don't know, with Amazon or something. Because when we do that, we actually trigger the mechanism which governments know very well and understand very well. And I think some of the use cases like Bitrefill or some other companies, I think the first use case which was successful was the Silk Road, have proven that we can build a parallel economy that governments can actually adapt to. If we try to integrate into the mainstream economy, then we are basically in their playing field and we're going to lose that battle.
If I can say just one sentence. My very good friend Frank Brown, probably you know him, he used to say, technology leads, politicians just follow. So be aware of this sentence.
Just another very quick comment, if I may. When we talk about taxation, we think about the traditional, Middle Ages model of taxation, in which a guy comes to your home, possibly with a gun, and they tell you, give me this percentage of your worth, otherwise I will put you in jail or kill you if you resist. But this is the typical taxation model. But there is another more subtle taxation model that is actually the one that governments are using more and more in the last century, which is taxation by inflation. So the same guy comes to your home with a gun, but it doesn't tell you, give me part of your money. I mean, it does. But apart from that, it tells you, you cannot use any monetary mean which is not controlled by us. That's a crime, legal tender. So you cannot use other kinds of money. And the kind of money you can use, you are forced to accept it. You cannot refuse it if you are in a business. So it's legal tender. And we can inflate the supply. And you have to buy our inflation because you are forced to, because you don't have a choice. So taxation by inflation is another kind of taxation which is even more threatened by Bitcoin than direct taxation. Because direct taxation, yeah, you can escape the cyberspace and the e-commerce, but then they can tax your property, your real estate very easily. But then I don't know how to quantify, but probably 70% of the expenses of a big national government today are paid not in direct extortion, but indirect extortion via inflation. So when you attack that side, it's also very powerful, even because if the government doesn't have money to pay for henchmen to come to your door, they can tax your property, but they have to pay people in order to shoot you if you don't pay, which is, not many people will work for free for a tax agency. So that's also a strange feedback loop.
I'm not sure whether there's such a thing as a good taxation model, especially for Bitcoin or crypto, because to me it's probably a question like, what type of poison would you prefer today, cherry flavored or lemon flavored? It's like, who cares if it's there to kill you?
So I'm just going to give an example. I don't remember which country it was, but I read somewhere that it was somewhere in Europe, I don't remember which country, sorry again, but they were basically going to tax every trade you made, and they were going to take 1% of every trade you ever made. And that sort of taxation is just pure theft, and I honestly hope that governments wake up and start to understand the space before they start making rules as ridiculous as that.
Good point. So in the US right now, there's a thing formed called the Ratings Council, which is custodians and exchanges like Kraken and Coinbase. joined forces, and they will rate your project if it's a security or basically if it's a security or a non-security. And this leads to another question. So if you're not regulated by the government, you're going to be regulated by these rating councils, which are just the beginning. And the question is more like, it's not more of a question, but let's discuss this a bit. Like, who do we trust? Do we trust? Which is the lesser evil? Which would you go for?
Just trust, no one, verify. That's all I've got to say.
This is true. Probably to me, the fact that all these entities arise is pretty much common with the whole idea of now we are going to build the right version of socialism. Like, it never works. Because at this point, we can see that with all these custodians having or trying to build the power over the crypto and all over the space, you can see that we have the exact same elites, probably new ones, but it starts with the same and uses the same pattern. A bunch of guys having money and different kinds of other resources that are manipulating different markets in order to gain more power and more resources to themselves. So the pattern is still there. I really doubt that strategically something changes for better.
Well, so I think that we can divide. So there are two layers to this question. One is the rhetorical meme layer, and then I just say, kill all the custodian, don't trust, verify. I mean, we have to push people in order to keep Bitcoin resistant to the old problem of custodians on gold, for example. Gold was a peer-to-peer exchange method, but then it was more convenient to trust custodian and to specialize and to have division of labor and to have people keeping your gold for you and giving you receipt, and you can trade receipt. So this is a natural tendency, a natural division of labor tendency. You cannot really fight it. You can fight it a little bit on a social layer, meme layer, like custodianship is bad. But we have to accept the fact that eventually some people will decide to outsource security, outsource custodianship, basically. In this case, I think we can divide two classes of Bitcoin users. The direct Bitcoin users, the guy that they're using Bitcoin because they cannot use a bank account, these kind of people, they will not have the option to really use custodians at scale, because the custodian, in order to be useful, has to be trusted. In order to be trusted, it has to be reputable and big and visible. And if it's reputable and big and visible, then it's regulated. And if it's regulated, you could use a bank account in the first place. So eventually, at equilibrium, if you are a real Bitcoin user, you cannot use a regulated custodian for that. Otherwise, just use a gold. But there is a second class of Bitcoin user, which is more parasitary, but it's fine, which are the Bitcoin investor. So let's assume you are a Swiss investor. You don't care for censorship resistance. You really don't care. You are a privileged person. But then you see that there is a new asset class which is behaving in a different way from any other asset class because it is censorship resistant. And so you just want to leverage that reality as a hedging in your portfolio. So you don't care for crypto anarchy or anything. You just want to invest in Bitcoin flavored risk. So in that case, I think that custodianship, industrial custodianship, professional custodianship will play a huge role, a huge part. The only thing that the reason I don't think that crypto industry will have a big part on that is that eventually, when this business will become big, existing banks will have like the first mover advantage. Anyway, they're already insured, regulated, recognized. So if you can choose between, you are an investor, not a crypto anarchist, and you want to decide who is going to custody your Bitcoin. You're already trusted Swiss bank or a new Silicon Valley startup. No, I mean, I don't care about technology. I will use my already existing bank. So probably this is not a great business area in which to spend your enterprise in.
In a free market society, we should trust your organization based on the reputation, and that's all. And if you don't trust any organization for 100%, you just try to diversify your risk to multiple custodians. So this is just my recommendation. Just make some research, some study, or buy the research and study, and choose the most trusted custodian. So this is my recommendation. Anyway, I would like to add to your previous answer regarding like a high inflation taxation. 10 years ago, I asked my friend, who is a very famous Slovak economist, can you explain me why should we pay taxes when the government can print as much as money as they want? And he, like a very famous economist, he just told me, you know, this would look really bad. That's all. So there is no difference, you know, like you can gain money in both ways, basically.
All right, so the original question was about the Cryptocurrency Rating Council in the United States. And we can see that the United States is the worst at regulating cryptocurrencies. And they started, I think, with BitLicense. Was it 2012 or 2013? But it was terrible and did not allow businesses to operate with Bitcoin at the time. And a lot of businesses moved out of New York, and then BitLicense started to become a framework for other states to implement. And what they have done 2 days ago with the IRS and the whole airdrop drama, and a lot of people on Twitter just discuss, what if we create an airdrop token and send it to our legislators, and they receive it for free and then pump it, and they're going to have millions of dollars worth of tax money that they have to pay? Which is an interesting question in itself, because it proves that the regulators haven't thought of this, and they are very bad at understanding all the implications, both at the technical and the economic layer. And the fact that you have some exchanges, which are private actors, that get together and decide on something, I mean, they are competitors. They have no reason to agree that BNB is a good token. I guess Binance will rate it as not a security, but Kraken will say, no, that's definitely a security. And they have found some kind of middle ground, which may not be ideal, but I think is still useful in the grand scheme of things and will be useful for something, at least. We're not letting the governments play by their own rules. We willingly show them, okay, we have this. Bitcoin is the most decentralized. On a scale from 1 to 10 of being a security, it's a 1, just like Monero and what other protocol was there. So I think it's a good initiative, and teaching and educating our governments should be part of what we do on a daily basis.
Good point. Speaking of government, so let's go a bit for Libra. This summer, Libra released its white paper. Who read the white paper from this room? Come on, hands up. Okay, cool. I was like, how the hell did they write this shit? Like 32 people. Anyway, and one of the points that I really liked is that the first time in 10 years, the Congress recognized that Bitcoin is superior. So it took us a long while. And I think that was the most entertaining debate that we saw ever in Congress. And we had really good representatives for the Bitcoin community. I feel a lot of people made their point. So the question is, do we need things like Libra? Do we need this kind of evil bad guy in the house in order to promote that Bitcoin is actually positive and it's like wash away the sort of negative mainstream media around it?
Okay, so the first thing is Libra is not a cryptocurrency, but what I really like about Libra is that it helps us, our society, to shift to the second financial paradigm. You know, so I think it is the high time to do that, to switch from the a really complex traditional banking system to something completely new. And thanks to Libra, it's possible, and I'm afraid that it'll be like a mainstream standard, like a mainstream financial tool. But I think like a lot of people can benefit from using Libra, especially because in many countries people don't have bank accounts and they cannot like earn money, for example, remotely. And so from this point of view, I think that Libra can increase like global productivity or prosperity. But of course, the problem is that it's a private coin controlled by a few organizations. But anyway, maybe Libra can be also like a good PR, a good advertisement for people just to look for bitcoins and like real cryptocurrencies which are not controlled by
It's like
someone
Libra.
else. So this
so
maybe,
bad you're gonna use Bitcoin.
yeah. So this is the thing. Yeah. So I want to use Libra, but you know, and also the thing is that most people, not probably us, but most people that are willing to exchange their privacy for benefits Facebook offers to them, you know, and this is completely fine. For most people, privacy means nothing, you know, so what they should have such option to exchange their privacy for something else and to give up their privacy of transaction, because in case when everybody starts to use Libra, there will be also no financial privacy. So, but at least for me, it means this shift, paradigm shift from traditional banking system to something completely new.
So I love Libra for 3 reasons. The first is that it was a very funny show about schooling amateurish crypto scammers about how you do really sell vaporware. I mean, I can imagine Facebook representative, okay, you are making millions and a lot of PR around a completely vaporware project that you probably will never take off with a Swiss foundation, and you think you are good at that. Hold my beer. This is how you make everybody talk about my project without any... They're great. I mean, kudos to them. I mean, if you think about that, imagine the 2 scenarios. In one scenario, they say, okay, we are going to compete with Alipay. Let's issue a PR, or a press release, we are going to compete with Alipay. Okay, a few e-commerce nuts, they will comment it, and one day, and the news will be over. Okay, we will create a cryptocurrency, which is actually US dollar, maybe 95% US dollar and 5% US treasury bonds, and it will be completely free, except that it will be banned in Iran and Korea and everything. So basically, we will do nothing except competing with Alipay, but everybody's talking about us, even in US Congress. But the second reason is that it did have a snowball effect over Bitcoin. It happened, like what you said. We took advantage of, I mean, Facebook took advantage of Bitcoin to do this, to pull this marketing stunt. But we took advantage of Libra to discuss Bitcoin and the official technical shitcoin word in Congress of the United States, which was a very good PR. And the third kind of layer is getting back to my presentation in Riga. Confusion can help anti-fragility in the early stage of a project. So if the government really doesn't know what they are facing and they are distracted by Libra, maybe it gives up more few years in order to strengthen Bitcoin before the government really understands what's going on. So they are decoys, and as Olga said, thank you for your service, and Libra as well. I don't think they will go so far to end up in jail for us as others, because they are smart. But I mean, I love them.
To me, Libra case probably has 3 layers. The first one is the lightest one, which reminded me of, now I will have my own Bitcoin with blackjack and ladies. The second layer is, probably someone remembers this cartoon of a giraffe in the quicksand, which goes through 5 stages of grief and loss, like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I think Libra is a symptom of bargaining. When, like, at first government failed, like, miserably to regulate it, to shut down Bitcoin, and now they're just trying to sell the idea, and corporations to sell the idea of a new shiny coin that you can invest in. And probably the most serious part of this is, as Pavel also said, people always try to find some authority to trust. And they used to put their money in banks, and corporations at the moment are trying to become new banks.
So I just want to point out that Libra is still a concept. Everyone is focusing so much on it as if they started already. This is just an idea and people are focusing on it. And I'm glad they are. Because if Libra actually goes through, it's a stablecoin, people will start off with it. But they'll have this thing called stablecoin. They'll start researching. And as soon as you put cryptocurrency, the right coin comes up, Bitcoin. And it'll be a getaway for people to find out the right way in the space. So I think at the start, I was really against it, but if Libra won't be too complicated as they're trying to make it, it might actually end up being a quite positive thing. But then again, we've got companies, huge partnerships that were announced with Libra, like PayPal recently pulled out. I think everyone was buzzed up at the start when it comes to Libra, and now people actually start researching and putting more thought into it, and are actually realizing that it's just a shit and pretty much nothing else.
Yeah, good point. To me, it was funny whenever I read like Libra will serve 2.4 billion users, and I'm like, yeah, but if it's you kind of position it as a cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrencies are banned for 800 million of your users. So how is that correct? The next question would be about, since we're talking a bit about stablecoins, let's go into the subject of, there are several countries around the world, including the Eastern Caribbean central bank countries and a couple of countries in Europe and Asia that look into launching their own currency, cryptocurrency, whether a stable coin or a kind of a digital currency of national currency. So what would be, I want to talk a bit about that versus Bitcoin, as Bitcoin becoming the national currency of certain countries. So let's talk a bit about the main advantages and maybe scenarios, where could it lead? From my take, I always see stable coins working as a transition. So if it's too hard to get people from fiat into Bitcoin, then we take them through a stable coin. It gives them a bit of a taste, and then we just move them to Bitcoin eventually in like a couple of years. But I want to hear your thoughts on it.
So I'm really glad to see that the governments are finally starting to embrace the cryptocurrency space. It's about time. It's been 10 years. Hooray, they're finally starting to research what cryptocurrency is. And similar to Libra, I think the stablecoins, national stablecoins, will be a start for people to actually become part of the space and have their own Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, just creating another stable coin is just having another fiat currency at the end of the day. It's not really much to it. I think if there was to be the one currency, it should be Bitcoin. But if people want to start doing their own stable coins, then go for it. But they won't survive. It's not the purpose of why the blockchain space was created in the first place.
I think that it's probably good to step forward the mass adoption of Bitcoin, A, and B, probably the most hilarious case that popped up in my head while I was listening to the question is, like, you are crossing the border from one country to another, and your mobile wallet gives you this pop-up notification. Do you want to change your local currency from crypto dollar to crypto euro? But you have Bitcoin. Therefore, you just tick no and never ask me again, check boxes, and you're good to go.
Yeah, so, I mean, national cryptocurrency is just, again, just marketing, because the national currencies, they are fiat, they are regulated in the issuance phase, and in the transaction, which is manipulable, and in the transaction phase, which is censorable or censorship prone. So national cryptocurrency will be manipulable in issuance and censorable in transaction, so the same. Also, most fiat currencies today, they are digital in monetary base mostly, like US dollar is probably what, in M3 is probably 99% digital. So the physical counterparty already doesn't exist anymore. Already you use digital systems and cryptography. When you send a wire transfer, use TLS stuff, use cryptography, public key cryptography even in some cases. And so everything is already cryptocurrency, if we want, or nothing is. I mean, it's just marketing, just naming stuff. The evolution could be, as you said, a nation state actually in some degree adopting Bitcoin either as part of their national central bank reserve or as, let's assume, a legal tender or something crazy like that. I think that from a single player game theory, that doesn't make any sense. If you are a government, as Vlad explained, what you want is power and control, and you can control people by managing the issuance, managing the supply, and you can control people by managing the censorship level of transactions. If you switch from your own fiat money, digital even better because you control everything, to Bitcoin, you are losing everything. You don't gain anything and you lose everything as a government. So from a single player game theory point of view, that's just crazy. But luckily, we don't have yet a one world government. We have a multiplicity of governments which are fighting among them, which is great. And so hopefully a multiplayer game theory can actually make reasonable that some small state will just adopt that in order to piss off another state, or that some big state will use it because they think they can still leverage other states as a control layer. So the game theory is more complex. So I can imagine maybe some rogue state using Bitcoin as a reserve. Like, I know that some states, like, I don't know, Bulgaria and some other states, they happen to have some Bitcoin seized from illegal activities, and they don't know what to do with that. And that's already a beginning of, I mean, that's a layer. What is even more interesting for me, because this is possible, but it's very unstable. Eventually, central banks will know that Bitcoin is bad for them, because it is. But the single persons, well, governments are not entities. They are just organization, criminal or not, they're organization. And their organizations are made of people. And when a single person inside the government or inside the central bank start to take Bitcoin, use Bitcoin to export capital, or to imagine like a dictator escaping without the gold bags, but with a Bitcoin wallet. And so when a politician will start to take bribes in Bitcoin, or when the CIA start to pay black ops in Bitcoin, that's a kind of mainstream adoption that I like.
So national cryptocurrency, or any national currency, may be great for politicians, not just because of PR, but because they print as much as money they want. So thanks to national cryptocurrency and thanks to national currency, they just can cause inflation or hyperinflation and steal money from their citizens. So national cryptocurrency is definitely not good for citizens, but maybe very good for politicians. So this is the thing, and I know this very well because I spent a lot of time in South America, and there are nice examples from Argentina or Venezuela, where also they print their own currency. And on the other hand, you have countries like Panama, for example, or Ecuador, where they use stable shitcoin, which is American dollar. You know, but it's still better. It's not national currency. So I think I'm not like a Bitcoin maximalist, but I have to say that national cryptocurrency or national currency is usually always a bad idea.
Oh, I agree it's a terrible idea, and I can explain why. Because nowadays we have banks as private institutions that manage your money, but if we're going to have national cryptocurrencies, then the government basically runs a blockchain which audits every transaction, and the government becomes able to basically censor you. Whereas with banks, at least you get to go to another bank and get another chance if you're a bad citizen. And I don't think anyone, regardless of how terrible they are, should be limited in their financial freedom. And I think that ultimately the point of Bitcoin is to attain freedom and not inspire any kind of Orwellian mechanism that will end up enslaving us and turning us into some kind of cattle which have QR codes that we scan on each other. I very much oppose the idea of national cryptocurrencies, and I think I would rather have cash, which is a lot more private than credit card payments and then Bitcoin transactions and anything else.
Okay. Last question, and then we're going for lunch. So I want to talk a bit about the EOS fine, which was not fine at all. So basically, this created a new monster in the sense that companies like EOS, so all these altcoins that have behind them a company corporation or any kind of legal entity, they can now buy their way out of regulations. And EOS just demonstrated that with just 24 million, it can shut up the SEC, and they will not have issues moving forward. So this new monster means that all these altcoins and companies will look into fueling money into these institutions, and institutions would benefit because basically the money never goes into the pockets of the initial investors that lost it. They will go into the treasury, and it's basically lost money for us, for them not. So the question is, we'll probably see this happening in other countries as well, and jurisdictions. If it happened in the US, there are plenty of countries that copy the SEC model. Why is this dangerous for Bitcoin, and what we can do about it, or what kind of message should we send? Just a penny for your thoughts. Satoshis for your thoughts.
My reply to the whole YA situation and then Coin, which received a bigger fine despite not making as much money, is that welcome to the world. The more lawyers you have, the more free you are. That's how it operates, basically. And it's something that I like to believe that we can change with Bitcoin or anything that is private and pure in its intentions. Because with our current system, you can evade regulations and be as malevolent as you want, as long as you're rich. And maybe that's part of human nature and it's part of how we operate, because I don't find that SEC fine fair in any way, but at the same time, it's the same kind of law that was applied a few days later to Coin. And if I think, what was the other question? If I think this affects Bitcoin? Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it should encourage us to be more bullish about Bitcoin and keep it decentralized, and not allow nation-state actors and private actors and corporations take over it while promising trace the block size to do whatever for it. I think at this point, even confidential transactions through a hard fork can be a bad idea, because you'll lose the auditability, and then we're going to have a scenario where it's hard to tell if the 21 million hard cap is still being respected. And that's the whole value proposition. The moment when we have more inflation, then I guess the point of Bitcoin becomes that it's censorship resistant and private. Okay, I guess we can do that with other projects, or we can do it on second layers.
I think it's a big challenge for Bitcoin and traditional cryptocurrencies. So it's also like it should be motivation for Bitcoin developers to do or to make Bitcoin more attractive for masses, and also for the authors of the other cryptocurrencies to be attractive. It's just a fight. You should be aware of that. Also, you should be aware that rich people, they always will have enough money not to pay taxes, for example, or to evade regulation, and it's just a fact. And I think it's better, like the better thing, like how to fight with this situation, because it cannot be won, is just to be aware of it and try to cope with the existing status quo.
Yeah, I think that this kind of events, I mean, this is good for Bitcoin, as the meme says, in at least two layers. The first layer is that, as I said before, this can be used as decoys, so they are low-hanging fruits for regulators. So regulators, they have to show that they are regulating, and if there are low-hanging fruits like very centralized projects and very financially exposed projects, which you can find, I mean, you cannot find Bitcoin, you can find EOS. So this kind of low-hanging fruits can just keep the regulator busy. The second level is that it's fine to maximize the level of obfuscation towards the regulators, but it's not fine to maximize the level of obfuscation toward ourselves. So it's okay if we scam the regulators, but let's not scam ourselves. When the government is not attacking centralized projects, people start to believe that there is no cost in centralizing your projects. And there are a lot of gains in centralizing your projects, because finally you can do marketing, monetization. When you centralize, everything is easier. So if the government is never attacking the centralized soft spots, people start to get lazy and to get soft and to centralize everything because it's more convenient. It's a natural tendency. So it's good that sometimes the government plays the government. Oh, that doesn't mean that I like it. I hate when private adult individuals, they want to engage in any kind of scammy transaction and the government steps in. I hate that. But it's useful for us. I think my position is, I don't know, an oncologist. You are an oncologist. You hate cancer. But I mean, you need cancer to work. So this is basically, we hate regulation, but regulation is the reason Bitcoin is alive. It's good for Bitcoin ultimately. Also, if EOS has any problems and eventually maybe stop working on anything, I think that's super interesting from an entertainment point of view, because then we get to see Dan Larimer launching the 5th scam coin, which would be, I mean, I'm super curious. I mean, go Danny, we want to see the 5th one.
Yeah, I think that this whole pattern of giving a bribe to some authority, for example, in order to cover all the shit that you have been doing, is like a normal thing for us as human species, unfortunately. But still, I think that now, after having this tiny shot of like Bitcoin vaccine, we can see this agony of all these governments, banking systems, classical ones, slowly dying. Therefore, I think that long term, after we survive this agony / shit show, we will come up with something worthy.
I mean, just like Vlad said, what happened has happened, it's life, you know, you get punished for things. I'm just really curious to see where this goes and how far they're actually going to take it, whether they're going to question every major project that raised some funds, or whether they're just going to be questioning whatever comes up into their head. EOC, a coin, that's number 2 of them that they currently done it. Yeah, just interesting to see what's going to happen next.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a wrap.